The fun is back, oh yes siree. It's the 2600 from Atari. It's the video system with classics galore, from Space Invaders to cars that roar. A real hip joystick controls the screen. Solaris is hot and Midnight Magic's mean. And one more thing, it's got a special low price, under 50 bucks. 50 bucks? Now isn't that nice? The fun is back, oh yes siree. It's the 2600 from Atari.
If you got an Atari 7800 in the United States, odds are you have a controller that looks a lot like this. And, well, we'll take a whole separate look at this in a different review. In many other parts of the world, you were far more fortunate and got a controller that looked like this. For one thing, in big chrome lettering it says Atari. Look how nice and shiny those red buttons are. I like the little thumb imprints. They give you a little grip thing back here so you can hold your fingers in there and mash those buttons for awesome video games like Xevious and Donkey Kong and Ms. Pac-Man on the 7800 Pro system. The thumb pad is kind of unique too because you can see it has a nice textured feel to it, and although I don't have it anymore, there was a little joystick thingy that you could screw into there and it stuck up to about here, so you could actually have a little more of a joystick feel. I picked this one up after so many years of frustration with trying to use this controller for Atari 7800 games, and it really is far superior. Stella, today we're going to talk about Injustice. Now, as an American dog, aren't you upset that we didn't get this controller in the United States for our Atari 7800? That's right, lay down and protest. It has a few drawbacks, most notably, like many other Atari controllers, the cord is entirely too short, so you have to keep this thing right next to your game console to play it. Other than that, I personally like the fit and finish of it. Keep in mind that this controller and the Atari 7800 came out at a time when Nintendo was dominating the market, so you can see a similar layout to these two controllers for sure, and similar size. I like the textured feel of the Atari controller better, but in many ways the Nintendo controller probably is a bit superior. But let's look back at this one. You can use the thumb pad, which is nice, responsive, works as well as you would expect. Many Atari 7800 games used button 1 and button 2, a 2-button layout. This also works with the Atari 2600. And overall, it's a pretty solid controller. Look at that. See, she clearly likes that Atari 7800 controller much more than the one they gave us here in the United States. Thanks a lot, dog. I don't drool on your things. This horrendous monstrosity is the Atari 7800 controller that came with the Atari 7800 in the United States, and my list of complaints with this thing is so long I can't fit them into one review. So I'll just start with the highlights first and foremost. I can't stand how you hold this thing. It feels more like a remote controller or a phaser gun or something than it does an actual joystick controller. You might be thinking, how could you dislike anything that says Atari in such a loud, obnoxious stainless steel fashion? And to be honest with you, this is my favorite part of the controller, because you definitely represent that you're playing Atari, there's no doubt about it. Now really the main problem with this thing is in the way you hold it and the inability to really get control of these two buttons when you're playing the game. The joystick itself is clumsy, it's awkward, it doesn't move very far as you can see, and that's just it's kind of hard to use because it is a bit stiff, or you could be very gentle with it. However, if you're holding it in your hand and you're really getting into a video game, it just slides around in your hand like this. So it's just a really odd design, and obviously they were trying to do something drastically different than the competition, and they succeeded, but not well. You can see that we have two buttons. Many Atari 7800 games used two buttons, which was one button more than the Atari 2600. And you gripped it with the thumb here and a finger there, but with no real way to support this thing, it would just slide around in your hand. And who wants to play a video game like that? It's actually, just try doing this on your remote control home if you don't have one. Pretend like there's buttons there and press them like that, and then try to rock a joystick at the same time. It makes you want to just smash this thing into the ground, but you can't because it says Atari. There's some other odd design highlights on this thing. Note we have a thumb grippy pad here and then some little design cues there on the plastic. And presumably that's if you want to play something like Ms. Pac-Man, where you just want to put your thumb there and grip the joystick and play, but that actually doesn't work too bad because it does give you a place to actually hold the controller steady. But if you're playing a game where you're using two buttons, forget it. It's just all over the place. And they also give you that same design thing on the back. Standard Atari 2600, 7800 plug. You can see you got a textured plastic all the way around this thing. They give you a little bit of grip control here, but this thing is still just pretty much an abomination as far as I'm concerned. And if you have an Atari 7800 in the United States, instead of using this controller, you're better off either playing with this controller or the Sega Genesis controller, which will also work with the Atari 7800. If you don't like the Atari 7800 controller, nod your head back and forth. That's right. It does have that nice chrome plate on it though. Come on, you do like that, don't you? It's so easy.
He can't turn back. Liberate target at 039er.
Roger, control.
Approaching an airspeed. Way to go.
626. Taking West Canyon.
Good call. Fuel critical, sir.
Choppers at 3 o'clock. Roger, I copy.
Pilot's closing, sir. I direct, sir. No, he'll decide that. Fuel critical, sir.
He knows that. Sir, he's opting for the East Canyon.
Negative. That's a trap.
River 8 to home sweet home. It's getting
River 8,
area.
can you make it? River 8, can you make it? Do you copy?
It's only a game. River Raid for the Atari Video Computer System, designed by Carol Shaw for Activision.
Something's coming up the plumbing for Luigi's in a bind. Giant turtles out to get him, creepy crabs are right behind. Spider flies, jeepers guys, they're all coming out the pipes.
where are you?
It's Atari Mario Brothers with Mario from Donkey Kong, his brother Luigi, and lots of crazy creatures. And it's twice the fun when two play at once, because you need all the help you can get.
Mario, where are you?
Mario Brothers, new from Atari.
Galaxian Warriors, today we're going up against the most feared commander, and everyone counts. Even you, Quid.
Man your ships. Man your ships. Man your ships. We're going in. Assume attack formation. All wings ready, sir. Okay, I'm peeling off. Cover me. Cover me.
Roger on that, Blue Leader.
Heavy fire, 17 degrees. Affirmative.
This guy's good.
Watch your back.
We lost Blue Leader.
I'm hit. Who's left?
Quid.
No!
Quid, you're a credit to your cartridge. Galaxian, the arcade hit, now for the Atari 2600 system.
It's Donkey Kong, the arcade sensation, and now you can play it at home.
Hang on, sweetheart. I'm gonna save ya.
Now you can play Donkey Kong on your ColecoVision, Atari VCS, or Intellivision video game system. Donkey Kong has multiple screens, just like the arcade game.
You're not gonna stop me, you stupid ape.
Play Donkey Kong on your ColecoVision, Atari VCS, or Intellivision video game system.
Don't worry, darling. I'll save you. Help me. Oh.
You know, one of the best things about collecting and playing retro games is often discovering for the first time a hidden gem from 20 or 30 years ago. And for the Atari 2600, that is especially true. There were just hundreds and hundreds of games made by all kinds of people and in all kinds of genres, some of which have completely disappeared. But another great thing about retro gaming is the homebrew scene. Now, homebrew has been around since, well, the 2600 has been around really, but in 2010 it was really brought more into the mainstream light with the release of Halo 2600, released by Atari Age at the 2010 Classic Gaming Expo in Las Vegas. As you can see, it actually comes on a real 2600 cartridge. The game was developed by Ed Fries, who was the former vice president of game publishing at Microsoft, and as such was definitely involved with Bungie Studios. Being inspired by programming stories of the 2600, he got to work on his own game, which ended up being this, Halo 2600. And yes, it does have blessings from Bungie to exist. I got mine on the second or third production run by contacting Al at Atari Age. I think I paid about $20 for it, which, when you consider it comes on a real cartridge, isn't that bad. All you need is a real 2600, a 7800, or something that will play VCS cartridges, and of course you could just play it on an emulator like Stella for free. The game starts off with a cool little title screen of the Halo, I suppose, and an Atari 2600 version of the Halo theme. You can press the joystick button at any time and you will take control of Master Chief. And the game starts with you outside and with no weapons. Walk Master Chief upwards to the next screen using his little Fred Flintstone legs and grab the gun. The next screen over you'll see some kind of an enemy, I assume a grunt or something, I really don't know. And you can press the fire button to shoot directly forward. One hit will kill pretty much anything, so all you really have to do is press fire and dodge any shots coming your way. The gameplay to me is most reminiscent of, I guess, games like Berserk and Adventure on the 2600. Adventure in the sense that each screen is kind of part of a larger overall map, and Berserk in the sense that you have things firing at you and you have to fire back at them, avoiding shots and stuff like that. Although you can't fire at an angle, so that does kind of limit the gameplay a bit. Your enemies can, though. You have a couple of lives, and once they're gone, you're dead. Grab the key in the first area and you will open the door to the second area, a Covenant base, complete with Covenant holiday decor and new elite enemies. So it's a new area, but it's the same exact thing, just don't get killed. Shoot things if you want to, there's no score, so I guess you really don't have to kill them. Grab another gun, grab a shield, go outside and kill more stuff. Or don't. Basically, you're just walking through a really simple maze, and you don't really have to do anything. So in that sense, the gameplay is extremely limited. I guess you're supposed to shoot stuff. It does help, but in theory, I guess you could just get through the entire thing without having to at all. The last aspects of gameplay that I noticed are some boots to pick up, allowing you to walk faster, in the icy areas where you will keep moving even if you stop moving. You make your way through the icy area, then back inside, and then to the final boss. The only boss. The Covenant ship. And that's it. That's the game. All 64 screens are over. Really, there's just not much to Halo 2600. Mostly it's just got its attention because of the name that's attached to it. It's a Halo game outside of the Xbox, and Bungie was okay with it. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, but really as far as homebrews go, it's pretty weak. I've seen much better homebrew games. I guess as far as this style goes, I just prefer games like Berserk instead. It's not bad, it's well made, the controls work, everything is solid, all that good stuff, there's just not much to it. Yes, it's intense, but once you get through it once, why would you want to go back? You basically just run through a series of mazy levels, collect some guns, shoot some aliens, and then shoot the last alien and the game's over. Which I guess if you really think about it, that's pretty much all Halo is when you boil it right down to the basics. Except that this is over in about 15 minutes. Whatever the case, it's an interesting curiosity, and I'm happy to have it in my collection, especially because of the stares that it gets. Like, is this a real cartridge? Can you actually play that? Well, yes, you can. It's Halo 2600, one of the highest profile homebrew games in recent years, and even though there's not much to it, it's at least worth giving it a shot online.
Hey, here's a new game I just got recently. It's Pac-Man 4K for the Atari 2600, and it's an excellent homebrew version of Pac-Man, squeezed into a meager 4K ROM. Available at Atari Age, it comes on this awesome-looking cartridge and includes an equally nice-looking manual. And when placed into your 2600 or 7800, it will look and sound like this. You know, I guess Pac-Man is a really compelling character, 'cause over 30 years after his first appearance, there's still people making and buying new games centered around that hungry yellow dude. And Pac-Man 4K addresses a need for a quality Pac-Man port on the Atari 2600. It's pretty well known that Atari's own release of Pac-Man back in the early 80s was not the best port. Taken on its own, it actually isn't a terrible game, but as a Pac-Man clone, it's a long ways away from being edible. Pac-Man 4K, on the other hand, is quite nourishing and is far more Pac-Man-ish than Atari's effort. The sound effects are much more accurate to the arcade, and the maze layout and colors are vivid and true to the original. I should note that this footage doesn't really do justice to how the game looks on a television, especially a CRT. Pac-Man and the ghosts flicker continuously, but it's at a constant rate, which I think works well because your mind just tunes it out, rather than having the distraction of intermittent flickering. But this effect doesn't look as good in recorded footage, and the colors look kind of muted. But on a CRT, it's excellent and the colors really pop. Pac-Man 4K's graphical style is great, Pac-Man looks quite handsome, and I really like the look of the ghosts. It seems influenced by the Atari 8-bit computer / 5200 version, but with more rounded edges. And the fruit we have all come to know and love and eat look quite attractive. The behavior of the ghosts is also supposed to be somewhat similar to the original, but I'm not a Pac-Man expert, so I can't really tell. All I know is that the game plays great, with responsive controls, and the ghosts provide enough challenge for me. The only gameplay flaw I can think of is that occasionally you'll make contact with a ghost, but it won't kill you. This doesn't happen that often, though. Something missing from Pac-Man 4K are the animated cutscenes, but there's only so much that can be fit into a tiny 4K ROM. I mean, let's really look at this in detail. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4K. That's not a lot of K. I think it's less than 10, a lot less. So there just isn't room for all the extras. Maybe one day there'll be a Pac-Man 32,000 million K with all the animations, but for now, Pac-Man 4K really delivers in the most important area, which is the gameplay. If this was the version Atari released in 1981, it would have been huge. People would have come down with a case of Pac-Man influenza, or strep throat. Some Pac-Man related ailment, maybe alopecia, I don't know. But regardless, they would have been so engrossed in the game that they wouldn't care. And neither should you. If you got a 2600 and like Pac-Man and homebrews, risk your health and give Pac-Man 4K a look.